For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Basically, everybody's looking forward to what's going to happen, or looking at what they hope's going to happen as far as the Jackson Hole Symposium and the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, speaking tomorrow. So not an enormous amount of movement. Markets fairly mixed. Hong Kong was closed in its morning trade because of a typhoon warning. The Nikkei in Japan very, very slightly higher. In South Korea, the Kospi rose about 1%. So there's not an awful lot of movement as far as this morning's concerned. China's State Administration for Foreign Exchange, its SAFE, has warned banks against aggressively selling the currency, the yuan. And I think this ties in with China trying to promote fiscal and monetary policies to support what it describes as job stabilization. Now, regular viewers and you, ladies and gentlemen, will know a great deal about the property woes affecting the Chinese economy, and those are not going away. They're hoping that tens of billions of dollars in terms of stimulus may help. We're looking at $44 billion in credit. The numbers are a little fuzzy out of China, but I think that's new spending, £44 billion. And the Chinese EV maker XPeng is talking about having two new cars, one of which will rival the Tesla model midsize SUV. The biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, which is in Norway, is going to invest in an Indian solar project. It sees the company as a priority market. It probably will be the most populous country in the world as it develops over the next few years, and it's looking at the sovereign funds looking at it as a complete priority, and the targets that India is actually hoping to get to this year, 175 gigawatts. It's a very challenging target, but Norway hopes that its sovereign fund will help it on its way. US recap, stocks on slightly higher. Again, I wouldn't take too much notice of this, basically because it all depends what Jay Powell says tomorrow. But, maybe some people are wanting to get away from all the problems because cruise lines, best performing stocks, Royal Caribbean Group are up as well. But it has to be said that Jay Powell faces a fairly tough crowd in Jackson Hole. He was congratulated last year. This is the first time they've actually been face-to-face since the pandemic, but he was congratulated over his conduct during the pandemic. Now it appears as though the Fed is moving slightly behind. Joe Biden, his historic cancellation of $1 billion in student debt. There are questions being asked about this. Nobody's really sure about the exact figures. It could be between $300 and $600 million in terms of federal debt. But of course, the other side of it is it puts spending power in the hands of a group of people, that there are limits to who actually will get this, but still it's felt to be not a wonderful thing to be doing in terms of inflation, but people have been looking for this for a very long time, and students will no doubt, if they're not earning above $100,000 a year, will no doubt be looking forward to that. Let's turn our attention to the EU, and Germany has approved certain energy saving measures this winter, including the use of lighting and heating in public buildings. Why on earth they were not doing this before, I have no idea, but apparently, and we're going to see more of this as well. And certainly, as Russia appears to be carrying on its maintenance, at the latest count, it was Germany was getting about 35%. Of its gas from Russia, but that could be falling, as you know. Here's an interesting plan. You often ask me about what the UK is planning to do as far as the energy crisis is concerned, and they're talking about an energy tariff deficit fund. Now, basically, it's very complicated, but basically what it means is that they will give a certain amount of money, and then people will be paying this off in their bills in forthcoming years, right through to 2030. Again, it's a way of doing it, and it was floated earlier this month. The UK is warning, the Federation of Small Businesses is warning that the UK cost of doing business crisis, many commercial companies will not survive. energy bills tend to be negotiated as far as commercial bills are concerned in October of the year, and it's felt that these will be rising by about 4 times what people were paying in 2020, and thus a lot of people, including the Federation of Small Businesses, say thousands of companies could go to the wall. And British Gas is going to donate 10% of its profits to help energy bills. Again, it's a tiny amount, basically. It'll barely touch the sides. And if you look at the thousands of households will get grants of between £250 and £750. Exactly how that's going to work, we don't really know. But it no way gets round to the £10 billion that it's expected that the rise in energy prices will cost the people like me, the taxpayers. Oil, the usual tug of war, basically, it continues between what's supply and demand, basically, and it looks as though there's not an enormous amount of global demand right now, but as I keep saying, producers basically looking at about $100 a barrel to keep a smile on their faces. That's the global view.
Okay. Adesua, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, this may be comparing apples and oranges, but I'd like to ask you about the debt forgiveness for students in America. Here in Nigeria, we have a situation where the students have been home for 6 months for a lot of reasons, including funding of the system. But in America, we've seen this become sort of political and controversial. We have the Republicans saying this is bribing of the voters ahead of the midterm elections. But Michael Wilson, what do you think? What sort of impact is this likely to have on America's debt profile at the moment? Is there any sort of impact at all economically?
As I said, it's very difficult to say. The government in the United States, are we talking about student debt reduction? Is that what you want to talk about? Because yes, please. Okay, right, okay. So the government. I'm thinking that it could be between $300 and $600 million as far as the tax take is concerned, as far as federal debt is concerned. It may be more, it may be less. There are actually quite complicated details attached to all this. Further education, I mean, I don't know what happens in Nigeria. All I can say is that in this country, there's been a big revolt about the stat, because there's been a lot of grade inflation taking place during the pandemic. Now, there hasn't been any grade inflation. A lot of students are now not able to go to the universities that they want to go to. I have to say that, I mean, I have a degree myself, but that was a long time ago. It didn't accrue any debt getting it. And also, I don't necessarily feel that graduates necessarily attract higher wages now, which allows them to pay this debt. And to have this kind of debt hanging over you in the kind of years when you want to be saving money, you may be starting a family and all those kind of things, I think is basically appalling. The cost of further education has never really been looked at. We had some figures in this country. Currently, students pay about £9,000 a year. Some people are suggesting it should be around about £40,000 a year. It's very difficult. Personally, I think the answer to this is vocational training, apprenticeships, and people actually getting proper training about becoming entrepreneurs rather than studying the classics. All well and all good. I have an English degree myself. I can't really talk about that too much. But I have to say, I think that the dearth of apprenticeships is being seen, and certainly STEM subjects, which you will know all about, don't get a big call here, and certainly don't in the United States. That's where I think this is going. So yes, of course it's bribing voters. Of course it's about November midterm elections, because this has been prompted by politicians. Does it actually solve the problems of economy? I don't think it does.
Okay, Michael, I was going to say, today is the eve of the announcement by Ofgem, the energy industry regulator in the UK, with regard to the energy price cap. And the expectation is that this is likely to be very high, much higher by January, and by April, we may even be talking about over £6,000. So cost of living crisis is likely to worsen. Already, the Chamber of Commerce and also the Federation of Small Businesses, they're saying that, there's even crisis in the management of businesses. Now, what is likely to happen? The businesses are calling on government, the ministers, to help. but it looks like they are handicapped. It looks like this has to be the business for the next government, the next leader that will emerge in the UK. But what do you think is likely to happen? Because in a place like Stoke-on-Trent City Council, there are complaints that the suicide rate has gone up. And the principal reason that they are giving is the cost of living crisis in the UK. So many angles to it. Anyway, tomorrow, Jay Powell will be speaking at Jackson Hole. And ahead of that major speech that everyone is waiting for, there are expectations. What do you think we can expect? Jay Powell just peppering over the errors, particularly with regard to inflation, or what big news should we expect?
I think that you're right. He, as I said, I think he faces a very tough audience. And whilst, a couple of years ago, and in fact a year ago, whilst his conduct during the pandemic got a round of applause, the way the way the Fed is now chasing inflation is not very lauded. And there'll be a lot of central bankers. He'll have a very, very critical audience. Will he apologise? No, I don't think so. I don't think people like that do apologise. I think he will actually paper over the cracks, and he will reiterate what's actually happening. I mean, every word will be weighed, no question about that, because what people are looking for is clues as to how far this tightening is actually going to go and how far you can actually tighten an economy which is heading towards, which appears to be heading towards a recession. But there are very, very mixed views about that. It's a very large economy, and it's very, very difficult to understand what actually is going on. As far as here's concerned, it does look as though this is just an idea, but it looks like, given that the government has been looking at, apparently, and again, a number of options, there is no free money, but it could be that maybe small businesses are going to be asked to spread the debt of this over the coming years. It will please some, it won't please others. I think there's a big threat to small businesses. But there is one statistic which I'm going to share with you, which I learned yesterday, which is very, very apposite to all this. It's not so much fuel, but about food, and that's going to be the next thing. There was recently a survey. Now, this is unbelievable, I know, but if people feel that what they're eating is coming from sustainable sources, whether it be chicken, whether it be vegetables, whether it be whatever else it happens to be that they're eating, if they know where it's coming from, they are not resistant to paying between 20 and 30% more for that food. That's the kind of changing society that we live in. That's the responsibility of companies to its shareholders. These are kind of big changes taking place. So it's very difficult to predict. But if you want a today prediction about what I think will happen, certainly. Oh yes, and the other thing is that Ofgem will need to, and people will need to have this explained. Believe it or not, in this country, they think that a price cap is a cap on their bills. It isn't. It's a cap on what the generators, what the energy companies can actually increase their bills to. That's a real big difference, and a lot of people don't understand that. So there's a lot of mystery about this. But to answer your question, I feel as though one way forward might be to spread the bills into the future. Again, not very satisfactory, but what else do you do? Boris Johnson was in Kiev yesterday and was saying that, the British people are going to have to pay for the Ukraine war because the Ukrainians are paying in their own blood. That was pretty stark, wasn't it?
Okay, Michael, another unintended consequence of the war, with oil and gas price surging, the Institute of Fiscal Studies is reporting or projecting that the finances of Scotland will be healthier than that of UK. The deficit level. And perhaps this may just be the time for Nicholas Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, to look at another referendum, another unintended consequences of the war, the North Sea oil and the Scottish independence clamor.
Yeah, I have to say, I have never understood how Scotland imagines it's going to survive independence. I don't think it's much to do with North Sea oil. I think it's much more to do with what currency would they use? How would they take up the fact that the UK, or rather England and Wales and Northern Ireland, would not be funding its tax bill in the way that they do? I think the actual fundamental problems are much bigger than just about North Sea oil. And remember, it's the Scottish nationalists who stood in the way of opening up a previously closed down field, North Sea oil. So I really find it very difficult to understand what Scotland imagines it's going to do with its independence. But the most important thing is, would it have the euro, or would we allow it to keep the pound? And if it had the euro, what kind of conditions would the EC put on a new country coming into the EU? It's very difficult. It's not just about North Sea oil. There are much more fundamental questions at stake there.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abasi. Good morning, Mr. Ifeni. And good morning to Adeswa, our Edo Queen over in Abuja. We begin with African business update. Up north, Egypt, remittances didn't really grow much, 1.6% year-on-year growth, $31.9 billion. What's very interesting about this is that about 64% of the Egypt's remittances are from Gulf nations. So, and this is money coming from expats that are working in Saudi Arabia, working in Oman, working in the United Arab Emirates. So it's pretty healthy when you compare that to, here in Nigeria, where most of our remittances come from the UK, the US, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of regional supports for Egypt. It's a MENA, which is a Middle East, North Africa nation. So yeah, essentially they still rely heavily on remittances from Egyptians that are working overseas, very much, as far as being able to defend the Egyptian pound, which is a floating currency, I should point out. Yes, Egypt's remittances, again, not much growth, 1.6%, which points to some weakness in the economies where these expats and Egyptians working overseas are, which shows you that there's some global economic weakness to where remittances are not growing that much. We go from north to south. South Africa. Google is launched. They've already launched their Google Wallet in South Africa, and the Google Wallet is promoting contactless payments. So essentially, it integrates with Google Pay, allowing you to make payments for a number of things. Without having to use any cash. As far as security is concerned, in order for payments to be processed, it uses facial recognition technology, it uses fingerprints, and also you have the option of using a PIN. Google has also partnered with a number of banks in South Africa, Nedbank, Standard Bank, Absa, and so on and so forth, in order for them to be able to push these payments through in partnerships with the banks as well. They've also partnered with airlines, so you can also store, if you're going to a concert, you can store concert tickets on there. You can store boarding passes on there. You can store, IDs and so on and so forth. So they're really, really trying to push contactless payments. If you have subscriptions, to a number of publications, like Mr. Ifeni does, he looks at newspapers from around the world. If he had subscriptions with all these different publications, from the New York Times to Bloomberg and so on and so forth, you can actually house all of that on Google Pay and be able to make a single payment through your wallet there to a number of establishments. So the payment space, very competitive. Paystack is in there, Flutterwave is in there, a number of all these big companies around the world, Stripe, and also with Google making inroads on the African continent. I understand they're going to be, expanding to other African nations. Watch out for the payment space. It's really, really an interesting, exciting space as far as technology is concerned. We go to East Africa, and this is a data story. So essentially, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority in Kenya said that helicopters drove jet fuel consumption by 20% year on year. Why is that? Well, it was elections. Kenyan politicians like to use helicopters. It's easier for them to move around. It's faster. It's more nimble than airplanes. And so out of all the categories of fuel, from jet fuel to diesel to petrol, the biggest jump came from jet fuel consumption, to where oil marketers were selling to a lot of helicopters that were being used by politicians. Another thing that's very interesting, and this is where data is very important. consumption of diesel and consumption of petrol did not grow that much, and those are being used primarily by businesses, where you've got diesel as the biggest category in Kenya. That's for transportation, agriculture, and so on and so forth. So the story there is that with flat consumption of diesel and petrol, the economy of Kenya is still gradual. I mean, diesel consumption was up about 2% or so, was it 4%? Petrol consumption only up about 1 point something percent. So that's still slow. But there's something to be said for data, and I'm sorry to bring up Nigeria. The House of Representatives ad hoc committee is still, while we're still talking about fuel consumption, ad hoc committee is still investigating how much fuel we consume in this country. We still do not know. There is a massive data hole in this. We don't know how many people we are. We don't know how much fuel we consume. We don't know. We don't have unemployment data from 2020. It's an issue, and this shouldn't be difficult stuff. But yeah, to Nigeria, the Federal Executive Council, the monthly FAC allocation, it rose to 954 billion. I think it's the highest allocation under this presidency. Also, the excess crude account, which made so much news a few weeks ago, or a month ago, that fell from $31 million down to 350,000. Well, that rose to 470,000. As far as the reasons for the increase, consumption, company income tax, petroleum profit tax, VAT. As we know, the NNPC has not been remitting to the Federation account, so they've had to rely more on these other categories in order to raise funds to distribute. And again, if you devalue the currency, more money would come to the States. Haha, we talked about that yesterday. And then finally, Dr. Issa Pantami, Minister of the ICT Digital Economy, at the inaugural meeting of the Presidential Council of the Digital Economy and E-Government, he's saying that all the states in Nigeria should open up their own mini ministries of digital economy. That's what he's saying. He's saying that will help to promote the National Digital Economic Plan. Whether or not that is going to be productive that's up to you guys and everybody else.
Okay. Adesua, you want to go first?
Okay. Great. Rotus, I'm thinking about that campaign in Kenya as Nigeria counts down to official opening of the campaigns ahead of the 2023 elections. And I'm thinking, was that really smart? Is that a smart campaign strategy to burn all that fuel just to talk to the people?
Yeah, okay. I didn't hear her, unfortunately, but I think she mentioned something about Kenya.
Burning so much for campaign purposes.
Yes.
Is that cost effective for the politicians?
Yeah. Well, no, it is cost effective actually at this one, because helicopters primarily don't burn as much fuel as private jets or other commercial aircraft. So it's cost effective for them for the purpose of campaigning and being able to move from one area to the other. It's also profitable for the oil marketers, who just yesterday were talking about them complaining about the fact that Kenya has been paying fuel subsidies. They have been delaying those payments. So this avenue has allowed oil marketers, at least for the jet fuel category, to be able to make some money. But it's profitable for the folks who lease the helicopters. It's profitable for the politicians themselves, as they're able to run from one campaign spot to the next.
Well, I mean, I think what happened during the elections in Kenya, you could probably say it's a no-brainer, given the explanation that you yourself just provided. I mean, speed is important for politicians. Navigation is important. And, if you look at the opportunity cost, it's better to just get a helicopter and move. And in any case, most of those persons involved in the election, the presidential election in Kenya, the presidential is what I'm talking about. Yeah. They are really rich. They could afford it. Yes. Ruto and his running mate, they are heavily loaded. And the Azimio La Umoja coalition can also afford it. But in any case, it's a seasonal thing. The election is over. The matter at the presidential level has gone to the Supreme Court. However, the thing to worry more is that while there was an increase in the consumption of jet fuel and more money going to the oil and gas retail operators, It wasn't the same with diesel.
Correct,
or
yes.
with petrol. I
Yes.
think they call it gasoline in Kenya. It wasn't the same. Whatever increase they noticed was really marginal. And the cost of fuel per liter in Kenya is still on the high side.
Yes.
About 159 shillings, which translates into about $1.13, for the average consumer of petrol.
Yeah.
And which was why the government, maybe this was also because of politics, refused to remove the subsidy,
right.
That the regulator had promised will be removed in August.
Yes.
And then the minister came forward and said, no, we're suspending it. Maybe after the election, maybe that subsidy will be removed
IMF
fully.
wants them to remove it.
Yes, you said that 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Maybe that will happen, and there will be greater hardship, and with all the implications, for stability and households also in Kenya, as we have seen in some other places. Yes, Issa Pantami says that a digital economy, it should be embraced by the states in Nigeria. Well, the states don't have an option in the matter anyway. Because digital economy, what we call the new economy, incorporating also the Internet of Things. I mean, the world today is driven by technology.
Yes.
Much younger people talk about blockchain technology. They talk about the Internet of Things. They talk about cryptocurrency. If you want to, feed into that new trend, then of course you can't run away from digitization.
Right.
You can't run away from technology. And it's just as well that some state governors who were at that meeting presided over by Minister Pantami, the governor of Edo State, for example,
yes.
the governor of Imo State,
they
embraced the idea and they drew attention to the fact that, yes, digital technology, you will need it for education, for health, for businesses, in order to increase productivity, to scale up, and to open up opportunities, and in any case, to become more competitive.
Yes.
So I don't have a problem with that. But the missing link here is that there is no framework in place yet. And we already have a federal committee that has been set up. Up to now, it's just now that we're thinking of the framework. But the state governments themselves, have a responsibility to start thinking ahead of, the federal government. Let this not be that, they're talking about digital economy. Because Nigeria used to have a Ministry of Information and Communications. Okay? The biggest thing I remember about that is that whoever was given the communications function was always quarreling with the person in charge of information. That created confusion. Now, compelling the Jonathan administration to separate the two offices.
Yes.
And the first Minister of Communications was appointed in the person of, her name escapes me now, but she became Minister of Communications, and then she moved from there. She left. She laid the foundation, and after her, Minister Omobola Johnson, that's whose name I'm trying to remember, Chairman of Guinness, Omobola Johnson. She laid the foundation for that ministry. And when the Buhari administration came, the Buhari administration changed the name to Communications and Digital Economy, which I think is also a good idea. To hear that the states will embrace it is commendable, is welcome rather.
So with many ministries across all of them, you think,
you are thinking in terms of bureaucracy.
Right. So
but the subnationals, they are federating units. They also have responsibilities in, health, in education and all of that.
Right.
Their investment in technology, is not something we can discourage. We just hope that they will go about it, in the right way.
Right.
And not that investment in digital economy will become another opportunity for misappropriation of resources.
Exactly.
Well, getting the states involved in the digital economy, I think it's a no-brainer.
Okay.
Yes, because when you think of what that can do in terms of job creation, getting the youths to even work from their states, training them to work for IT firms across the world, I think it's something every state should key into. And it's surprising that only Imo and Edo are on board now, but I expect that more states should, if all states, because the young ones and these are digital freaks, and it's good to channel their energy in the right direction. If you don't do that, you know what they do with tech.
Of course they do.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Rutus.
Thank you so
very
much.
much.